Hi, my name is Travis Lindsay. I'm here as a representative for the Center for Entrepreneurship at Cal State Fullerton. I was previously a professor there, a couple other things, not about me. Instead, this interview is going to be about Chef Kristina. Chef Kristina is going to be speaking at a boot camp, a culinary boot camp, I believe, that's connected with what we're doing over with the North Orange County Community College District. And we wanted to interview her and get to know her a little bit before that boot camp. So Chef Kristina, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Oh, absolutely. I'm Chef Kristina Elmido. I am an alumni of Cal State Fullerton. I graduated in 2008. I studied entrepreneurship, but I still had the desire, I always had the desire of opening a restaurant. So in 2010, I decided to move out to Las Vegas and go to culinary school, which it was such an adventure. I went from going to culinary school to working in so many different restaurants all over the strip, off the strip. I worked with some really talented chefs and got some fine dining training from working from the best restaurants. And then I found myself in the personal chef space by taking a side job and finding out that I absolutely loved it. And I was honestly tired of being an employee. And I went back to my roots and said, I didn't go to entrepreneurship school to be an employee. And so I found a space that I loved. Although I had the goal of opening a restaurant, I fell into the personal chef space, and I still had that goal while being a personal chef at the time. But then, as things progress, I just decided that I really love being a personal chef, and the desire of opening a restaurant just went away. And actually being a personal chef is perfect for my lifestyle right now, because I am a wife and a mother, and owning a restaurant is a different type of beast in itself. You're committed to the hours, you're there all day plus, and the margins are small. It's a fun game, but it is something that you got to be extremely committed to, and just know that that's what you're getting into, and everything around your personal life has to understand that as well. And so here I am as a personal chef. I also have the catering side of my company, and how that came about was as I was promoting myself as a personal chef, I went to a lot of business mixers, and somebody had asked me, "Hey, do you cater as well?" And at that time I didn't, but I said, "Yeah, I do," with such confidence. And next thing you know, I fell into catering. I took the job. It was for one of the biggest law firms in Vegas. I did not know what I was getting into, who I was talking to. I just said yes. And I did that first gig out of my 2-bedroom apartment at the time. It was for 40 people. And I pulled it off. They love the food. Until this day, they are my client. And that was 10 years ago. So I started this business in 2013, and this is our 10th year anniversary. It's coming up in May, actually. So, it has been quite an adventure for me, this journey. So throughout this 10 years, I started with that. I fell into being a personal chef by taking a side job. I went to a business mixer. I fell into catering just by saying yes. And then before you know it, I'm catering these parties. I'm in front of the elite of Las Vegas, and the people who are invited to these parties that the elite throw are anywhere from millionaires, celebrities, and all that. With that being said, during this course of this 10 years, I have had the privilege of serving a lot of celebrities who come into town. I was Mariah Carey's personal chef for a while. And then I've cooked for people like Erykah Badu, Juicy J, Nicolas Cage. So there's a bunch of people who come into town that we have the honor to serve. We also, some of our clients also include the Ignite G League team. They are an NBA team. And, you know, I had also, throughout this journey, I also found myself on TV. I competed on this cooking show called Late Night Chef Fight that was on FYI Network. And so it has just been quite a journey. You know, I committed to the passion. I mean, I was passionate and I committed to the vision. And, you know, I said yes. And I think as an entrepreneur, it's very important to always say yes, be willing to, you know, see what's out there and like see where it takes you. And you have to constantly have an open mind and constantly be wanting to serve. Now in, you know, the culinary industry, like that is a huge thing. You have to have unreasonable hospitality. I don't know if anybody's read that book, but it's a great book, and in there it just talks about, you know, just always the willingness to serve and always wanting to make somebody's experience, you know, epic, and you know, always having that mindset has taken me really far. And, you know, I think it has been quite an adventure. So
No, yeah, that is awesome. And there's a lot of different little threads there that we could pull and talk about a lot. One of the last things you said though was about service, and that was something back when I was teaching entrepreneurship and leadership over at Cal State Fullerton. That's something I try to incorporate into each of my classes because that's something that's really important. And as you're in Las Vegas, I think it's pertinent to bring up that one of the case studies I would use was Steve Wynn, right? He's one of the big
I
hotel
worked at the
guys.
Win.
Yeah, and so the case was basically you know, focusing on service to as an extreme extent as you possibly could, right? So if somebody, you know, left their medication behind in the room, he had built the culture so focused on service that they had a bellhop who took it upon himself to, you know, get in the car and take that medication back to the guest who, you know, returned home back to, I think it was like Barstow or Fresno, and so did the trip. And he actually, you know, called out that person at the next big meeting that they had, and thanked him, and, you know, awarded him for going above and beyond. So that's something that I think that a lot of entrepreneurs kind of miss out on, right? They want to be their own boss, which means, you know, you give orders and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, you're still serving somebody, right? So is this something that you had to develop over time, or is this something that's always been a part of who you are, serving others?
I think I'm a natural server. I think that is like a part of my personality, but definitely you mentioned the Win, and I worked there, and I worked there early in my early days when I was learning. And I do think a lot of it was like, yeah, even though I wanted to serve, like understanding what that meant. And I think being open to the way other people think. So I grew up in a very like humble, modest home, but a lot of times with my particular clientele, they're coming from a different background. They're coming from affluence. They're coming from a place where they're accustomed to being served. And, you know, it could be very easy to fall into like, oh my gosh, like this person's so snooty, they can't do this for themselves, without even realizing that they grew up a certain way. So sometimes they just don't know how to peel their fruit. Literally at the Win, I had to work some action stations peeling somebody's orange. And you would never think that that would be a thing. but I've worked with so many like wealthy people, like people of generational wealth. They just don't know how. And it's easy to judge them. But then if you think about like, okay, well, like, how are they going to eat their fruit? Somebody has to do it. And, being open to that and doing it without judgment was definitely something that I had to learn. I had to actually humble myself even more and be like, okay, well, they just don't know. And you're there to serve them. And honestly, you're getting paid to serve them. So it shouldn't be an issue. That was something I had to learn. Honestly, that's something I have to teach my employees. So I guess going back to the question, I mean, it's a little bit of both.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, I mean, it's just really interesting because, I mean, especially for entrepreneurs and especially early on, one of the things that we teach over at Cal State Fullerton, I'm sure you guys will be talking about at that upcoming culinary boot camp, is to, get out and actually get to know your customer, find out what their needs are, and figure out, the best way to serve those needs, whether it's with a product or a service or, a combination of the two. So I think that that's great. One of the other things that you mentioned earlier on was about how you went and you worked at different restaurants. You went to a culinary institute over in Vegas. I remember back in the day touring the one in one of the ones in Southern California with my brother. He was thinking about going down that path for a while, but decided not to do it. It's a lot of work. First off, I mean, it's people don't realize that working in the food industry, that's a big, huge commitment. I mean, and the hours are insane. But one of the pieces of advice that I got when I was doing my undergrad from, I believe it was my international marketing professor at the time, was that, first thing, if you want to start your business, his advice was, go work for a corporation, find out how they do it, find out what they do right, what they do wrong, find out where the opportunities are. And so when you were doing that, working for different restaurants in Vegas, and what were some of the big lessons that you learned either from them or, in the early days of starting your own business?
Well, I just learned the process. I did go to entrepreneurship school, but they don't teach you. I mean, there's no way you could learn the day-to-day of like what an actual restaurant does. So when like I said, I moved out here with a goal of someday owning a restaurant. So I was very intentional. I went to, when I moved out to Vegas, I think I was like 25. I had already completed my entrepreneurship degree, and I took a job as a hostess. And, I took a job as a hostess to learn like what the front of house was, and what entailed, like how do they seat people, how there's a process, how do they turn the restaurant, how do the servers make money, so I approached everything with with learning, and you got to learn the operations of how they do things. And then with that too is like I also learned how to speak to guests, how to manage their manage their needs, and manage their anticipations, like, timing their weight, how to speak to them, how, those type of things. Then I picked up, so I worked my goal was to work every position in the restaurant from the front to the back. So when I moved here, I was working a lot. I was working about 16 hours a day, every day. I did it for a whole year. I worked like 2 or 3 jobs at a time. And that side note, that's another thing about being an entrepreneur. You cannot be afraid to work. You just have to like work your socks off for a while. And I did that. I worked every position. I worked as server. I found myself as a front of house manager at one, while I was still like cooking at another restaurant in the evening. So I worked every station at the back of the house. So I worked salad station, grill station, and I worked myself all the way up to sous chef at one restaurant. And then I became their pastry chef. And then at every stage, there's always something to learn. So I kept a notebook and I was diligent about it. Every night I would journal, um, and just try to really understand, like, when this becomes my own, what can I take away from it? And it's every aspect. It's not just the work of, what I'm assigned to, but also stepping back and being able to observe management. Because, as an entrepreneur, I mean, I knew that that was coming. I knew that I had to, like, understand what it was like to be an employee, to be an effective employer. And so, um, you know, during that time, I would see, okay, like, what that manager was like this to me. Why was he like this? How could I have acted different if this were to happen in the future? Like, what would I do? How would I feel? And so I think the biggest takeaway for me during that whole time while I was working at these different places was just be a student and not take things personal, and be able to, like, journal and just see things from a bird's eye view. And everything is to help me in my future. And I don't know if that answered your question. I think it kind of.
Yeah, no, it was great. Yeah, it was perfect. Yeah, and so that brings me into the next question about taking chances. So as you were telling me before this interview, you didn't really know what this was. You just said yes, and that's great. I think that's kind of the mindset that entrepreneurs really need to have. They need to be open to opportunities, right? And
Mhm.
so I think you said a little bit about that earlier. So when you're working with your employees, what are some of the mental blocks that they have trying to take over that mindset, saying yes to stuff, being of service to others? Is there any, are there any reoccurring objections that they have, and how do you overcome those?
I think their objections are honestly very similar to the ones that I had. They were my ceilings, as I call them. And it was honestly, it's being humble and not making things about them, and really understanding why you are there. Like, okay, you could take it all the way down to just being a line cook or a prep cook in the kitchen. You're there to prep the vegetables so the people on the line can execute their dish quick enough so the person sitting at the table isn't waiting 20 minutes for their food. So, like, understanding your purpose within your job, I think that is something that I constantly have to teach my employees is, like, your job isn't, you might feel like it's menial, but it's absolutely necessary, and giving them a purpose in their job. I think that's really, that has been something that has been really kind of it's a reoccurring thing, and it's challenging, partly because these are entry level positions. Most of these, they're kids normally, so it's a lot of teaching. And then not only are you teaching a mindset and understanding the service aspect, you're also teaching a skill, and sometimes they don't have the skill, and you, as an employer, you have to be patient. And it's frustrating, let me tell you, but you you have to be patient. I think as an employer, that's your challenge at that point, right? So
Right. Yeah. No, 100%. Yeah. And the thing that I was thinking about, I mean, you're in Vegas, so every meal is an experience, right? But I mean, that's also true of all different, walks of life, all different, experiences, whether it's in Vegas or in Fresno, or, I'm in Austin, Texas. And that's more or less what you're providing people when you do your service, right? So you're providing them the overall experience. And so whether they're, julienning carrots, or they're prepping potatoes, or whatever they're doing, they're an important part of that experience, right? So if they fail at their job, then the overall experience goes down, and it's not as good for everybody who's involved. Is that sort of how you conceptualize it for people, that they're part of this overall whole, and it's not just, oh, you're not just responsible for prepping some food, doing the mise en place or whatever the case may be. That's what you're physically doing, but it's also, a critical component of the overall experience.
Yeah, that's exactly what I
Yeah.
try to teach them. Mhm.
Perfect. Okay, so looking forward to the boot camp later this week. That starts Friday, right?
I think he said Thursday.
Thursday. Okay, yeah, it's this. Okay, so tomorrow. That's pretty quick. Can you give us a sneak peek into some of the things that you're going to talk about?
Well, I wanted to talk. Well, actually, honestly, I haven't thought of it that
Okay,
much, but
no
um,
worries.
I think one important thing is because these are culinary entrepreneurs, I think I want to give them a glimpse of what to expect. Like there were a lot of tough times for me starting
Mhm.
out, and luck. I mean, I honestly think it was a blessing that I was like young and single and did not have a family to take care of. I only had to take care of myself because there were times where, when you come into this industry, you don't make a lot of money. You're making like minimum wage to start, and there's no way to like jump from you can't just go to college and then be a manager at some of these restaurants because you won't know. You won't like you won't be respected because you won't understand what it entails. And so like if you're in this, if you're going to be a culinary entrepreneur, just make sure you're really passionate and make sure your passion, is more important than money, than trying to make money, because you might not see the money for a while, and you have to be okay with that.
Yeah,
So
yeah, and that goes for every kind of entrepreneur, right? I mean,
that's true.
yeah, no matter what you're doing, you're not going to see that money early on. You're probably going to be losing money early on. I mean,
Oh
being
yeah,
honest, yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so yeah, all right. So maybe this is a repeat of the last question a little bit, but if you could go back to 2008, you just graduated with entrepreneurship. What would you do differently? Would you do anything differently?
If I could go back to 2008, I think I would have started working in a restaurants before I even went to culinary school. I
Okay.
think if I knew that was the avenue that I was going to do, I would have started then. But I've been extremely fortunate. I think I'm like one of the rare people who actually knew very early on what they wanted. So I was able to, and I had enough foresight to go to business school first. I see a lot of my colleagues that, they didn't. They just went to culinary school, or maybe they worked at a restaurant, and they started their own company. And I would say going to entrepreneurship school really saved me in a lot of ways, because I've seen a lot of people who started in this business, and you see them come up and then you see them go. And I think there's a huge benefit of just having that business background and business sense, and understanding books and understanding accounting and understanding numbers, that a lot of culinary entrepreneurs, they're mom and pops, and they just start up with just common sense type things, which is great, but common sense or like practical things can only get you so far. You would need the extra things that I think the college teaches, like knowing how to fail, or knowing what to do not to fail super massively. I think, in 2008, I think I would have honestly not only, I think I would have valued my, because I always valued my education at Cal State Fullerton, but I think I would have valued it even more. Like I think I would have paid more attention in some of my classes than trying to just graduate. And then, you know, like the accounting class is super important. The personal finance class is extremely important. The business writing class, you know, there had been times where after I graduated, I would go back to those books, and because I had to make a sales letter or I had to like contact a client. And, you know, during your time there, you just think like, okay, am I really actually going to use this? But I think entrepreneurship is very practical in that way. I think maybe some of the other courses, you know, you don't get much out of, but I would say like the capstone classes, I got a lot out of, and I used constantly. And I think it has given me such a competitive edge, you know, among my colleagues. So in 2008, I think that's what I would have done.
Gotcha. Okay, so get that experience, you know, focus on service for others, you know, be open to opportunities. And there's probably a couple other great lessons in there that I'm just missing right now that I'll see again when I look at the video. But this has been great. Is there anything else that you would like to share? How can people get in touch with you?
Okay, yeah. You can email me. You can email me at chefkristinaelmido@gmail.com, or you can follow me on Instagram at Delightful Chefs. And also, you know, reach out to me on Facebook. I'll befriend you. I know it's probably old school for this generation, right? But I'm
Probably, I
still
wouldn't
on
know.
there.
I wouldn't know. Yeah, I was never on. I was barely on Facebook to begin with. I've always been old, so.
Yeah, so you can search me, Kristina Elmido. Yeah.
All right, yeah, and then also you're going to be at our boot camp starting tomorrow, and it goes through Saturday, I believe. And so I'll put all that stuff in the description. And yeah, thank you very much, Christina. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.